things you personally would like to accomplish?
Well, I'm glad that you think well of me from my bio, but...
Are you telling me it's not true?
No, I don't know. I hope I can be a better person. I think to the end of one's life, one should try to become a better human being. And that is one goal which always remains unfulfilled, right up to the end. I believe my own philosophy of life is that a person makes mistakes in life, and so it isn't any special craving for power or wealth or anything that I have, really. It's that I wish I can become a better human being. There are so many millions and millions who are much better. And sometimes I feel that I haven't done or contributed sufficiently to humanity or to people.
According to your bio, you certainly have made a darn good effort. Do you have any personal advice of things that we could do or should do or might be able to try to do to, in a sense...
I'd like to pose a question.
Okay. Yeah.
Mr. President, basically, she's really referring to the same subject, that for 50 years in South Asia, both the parties or leadership on both sides took a position on certain issues. And at the celebration of our Golden Jubilee, do you think the position taken by both sides really helped the people of South Asia? Or after 50 years, if the position has not worked, do you hope that it will work in the near future, and how do you substantiate it will work?
Well, I don't know. It's a very complex problem. You know, relationship between two countries, relationship between two neighbors, cannot be viewed in simplistic terms. You cannot pose a question like that and get a quick or a short answer.
We'll give you that.
I think basically both India and Pakistan have problems which are similar. In both countries, most of our people live at very low levels of existence.
I'm going to change that, don't worry.
We have in Pakistan 25% of our population living below the poverty line. In India, they have almost 50% of their population living below the poverty line. Their educational and literacy levels are only slightly better than ours, but they have a long way to go, and we have a longer way to go. Our health needs of our people are not being adequately met in both countries. We have both our countries have an abundance of natural resources, of water resources, which, by the way, are going to be very scarce in the next century. Especially since we live in, at least Pakistan is mostly in the arid zone, but we have a lot of snow-melt water and so on. So we do have, both India and Pakistan have good land. We are both countries are overpopulated in a sense, because at existing levels of technology, the kind of existence that our people can eke out is a fairly miserable one. Although if we improve our technologies, then our land can sustain many more people. But we hope that Pakistan's current high rates of growth will slow down in population. We have 5-6 years ago we were growing at 3.1% annually. Now it's come down to 2.7%. So it's like half a decimal point reduction every year. But we hope to have 1 decimal point reduction every year until we come below 1.7, and then I think we'll be able to sustain our population and progress and so on. But both India and Pakistan have this problem of large populations. We also have populations of low levels of technology, of our manufacturing sector not having developed sufficiently, and so on. But with all these disadvantages, there are also opportunities coming in the world. There are technologies that are making rapid progress in telecommunications and in information technology, in biology, and genetic engineering, biological sciences. In all these areas, countries like ours, if we can improve our knowledge base by deliberate governmental intervention and proper organization, then we can also leapfrog over periods and over technologies. So we have conditions both in India and Pakistan which allow us opportunities, and yet we are in difficulty. Now, these are our common conditions. There's a lot of diversity of cultures in both countries. In India, there are thousands of languages spoken. In Pakistan, there may be a score of languages spoken, but there's a fair degree of cultural diversity. But there's more homogeneity in Pakistan today, much more than in India. And therefore, in a sense, our problems of integration, of coming out ultimately as a success story, as a nation state, our conditions, I think, are much better than India's. Nevertheless, we do share some commonalities in history and culture. You see, Pakistan, as you know it today, we're not talking of the Pakistan that was created in 1947, because that had East Pakistan and West Pakistan. East Pakistan, whose population was mainly Bengalis, they decided to leave Pakistan. And whether it was because of the mistakes of the rulers or whatever, but they created Bangladesh, and that's a big populous country, but in a small area on the eastern side of India. We today, what is Pakistan? Are geo-strategically placed at a crossroads of at least 5 distinct civilizations. There is the subcontinental civilization, which was Hindu and synthesized with Muslim and so many other cultural, Arab and Persian and Turkish cultural influences. Then to our north and northeast is the great Chinese civilization. To our north and northwest are the Central Asian people, the new Central Asian countries, most of whom are of Turkic origin. Then, of course, there is Afghanistan, with whom we share a great deal of cultural and ethnic homogeneity.
They sort of scare me, though, with the things that are going on there now,
yes.
as a female.
It's unfortunate, but then there is the Persian civilization, which has a lot of distinct traits. Then there is the Arab in our southwest. And we have imbibed a great deal from them and given something in return to each one of them. So we are a very interesting cultural mix in Pakistan. And we have sort of pulls towards each of these directions. Dub us as a merely South Asian phenomenon, I think, is very faulty analysis, because in Pakistan, people generally want to identify themselves not so much with South Asia as with some of these other influences. So I think in Pakistan we have some traits and some characters which are totally different to India. In fact, even if you look at India, if you go to South India, It's quite different.
Oh, yes.
Northern Brahmin India, and, the big differences.
When I did an interview with Ambassador Kokar, he made that point that although people all think it was strictly on religion, he said culturally we were different.
Yes, my former political colleague, Senator Etizaz Ahsan, has recently written a book. In fact, he wrote this book when he was in jail with me, or at least part of that book, on it's called the Indus Saga, and he tries to establish that Pakistan has existed for as long as the Indus civilization has existed.
Except for the Mughal, the Mauryan and the British period.
And when
which is 500 years.
Which is fair. And he says
the rest
that
of history it's been separate.
he says that it was only in these periods that the whole of India was united. Otherwise, it was a distinct civilization. Now, I may or may not necessarily subscribe to his view, but there are people who feel that way. But I think there are many traits that are distinct and different of our people living in this part of the world. But given our common points and our differences, Pakistan wants to live as a friendly and a good neighbor with everyone. And if you look at historically, if you look at the last 50 years of our existence and of India's existence, we've been at peace with all our neighbors, except that we've had conflict with India. India has not been at peace with any of its neighbors. Whether you look at China, whether you look at Bengal, Bangladesh, before that East Pakistan, whether you look at Burma, whether you look at Sri Lanka, wherever India has been more or less, has had problems, although they were by far the biggest state, both in numbers and in economic and political and military strength. Nevertheless, all India's smaller neighbors have been not at ease with India. We've had very serious problems. We've had problems with India from day one. The first problem was that there was a perception that we have, supported by historical data, that the Indian leadership refused to admit that we were going to survive as a state, that they wanted us back. But that may have been their wish. I don't wish to give much importance to that. The major problems we've had with India from day one relate to our genesis, the way we were created, the way Pakistan and India came into being. And Kashmir is part of that. So that is our major problem with India. All other problems with India are minuscule, can be resolved in no time, and much bigger problems than those other problems, barring Kashmir, have been resolved. Like, for instance, the Indus waters distribution. Now, Indus is the lifeline, the Indus water system, the tributaries of the Indus for agriculture in Pakistan. And there was a very serious dispute on how these waters were to be divided of the 5 rivers, of major tributaries of the Indus. And ultimately, under the Indus Water Treaty, under the umbrella of the World Bank, this matter was resolved. It was more or less arbitration of sorts. And this was done as far back as 1960 or 61. And ever since then, this matter has not come up again. There is a certain procedure of how disputes are to be resolved, and such a big or potentially contentious matter has been resolved amicably. Now, other problems we have on the agenda for talks like Wular Barrage and Sir Creek and Siachen and trade between us etc. These are minor problems, but the fundamental one is still Kashmir, because it's related to our genesis, because it's related to a matter of principle. We cannot give up our principles. We have always contended that it is the will of the people that must decide their future. And what we want is that the people of Kashmir must decide. Now this is sanctified in the United Nations Security Council resolutions. It was India that moved the United Nations Security Council. We accepted the resolutions of the Security Council. India accepted the resolutions. It was only in implementation that India backtracked on those resolutions. And the resolutions, not one but several of them, passed from 1948 onwards, have again and again upheld the basic principles of plebiscite and referendum for the Kashmiris to decide their future. Now we want to harken back, go back to them. Number two, we feel that there is no military solution possible for Kashmir.
No, please God, don't let there be.
And India must give up that option. I went to India in May 1995 to attend SAARC summit, and Mr. Narasimha Rao was the Prime Minister then, and I had occasion to talk extensively with him and his people, and also, that is bilaterally, and also I had occasion to talk to a number of Indian opposition leaders then, many of whom are in government today, also with their newspaper editors and some leading academics and heads of think tanks. And I told them very clearly that when you have completely alienated a whole people, how can you ever win a military victory? It's not possible. And they agreed. They said, yes, we have alienated people. And I told them that at that moment they had 500,000 troops and paramilitary forces in the small valley of Kashmir. Very few in Ladakh and about 35% troops in Jammu. The rest mainly in almost 62-63% in the valley of Kashmir. So I told them, I said, they said, well, no, it's not 500,000, it's 300,000. I said, well, I'll go back to Pakistan. I'll summon all the ambassadors to our foreign office of all the countries, and I'll give them all exact troop locations and dispositions and police and other Indian paramilitary forces. And I'm not just making a claim which is a false one. And I did that. But I told them, I said, whether it's 500,000 or 300,000 or more or less, it is far too high a presence. And what are you doing it for? Against whom? If the people don't want them, the presence of troops will not help. So why don't you seek a peaceful resolution of the matter? And I said, Pakistan is willing to talk to you directly. We're willing to talk to you with other friends sitting in. We're willing to talk to you at any international forum. We're willing to talk to you bilaterally, multilaterally, anywhere, any place. And we're willing to carry on this dialogue with you. We know that a resolution of such a difficult problem cannot take place overnight. It will take time. But let us start moving in that direction. And I told them then, I said, since 89, 6 years had passed then. I said, in 6 years, your troops have killed or killed more than 50,000 people, 45 million. I said, you've maimed many more. Your people have indulged in gang rapes as a tool of oppression, just as they did in Bosnia. And you have committed other atrocities, custodial killings on a mass scale, and you continue to do that. You're bringing a bad name to yourself. You don't allow amnesty to go into Kashmir. You don't allow foreign newsmen to go into Kashmir. Your country is a democratic country. You struggle for democracy. How can you do all this. Indian laws, the Tara laws are highly oppressive. So I said, you are negating the philosophy of Gandhi and all that. So anyway, they said, and I told them, I said, look, I think it's time for us to look to the future. Your policies or any antagonism between India and Pakistan has not brought any good to our people. And we are amongst the poorest people in the world today. Maybe you have a little more poverty than we have. Our GDP per capita is maybe what, 70 or 80 or $100 more than yours. I think we are about $450 or $460, and they are about $370 or 85. But both are very low. And why can't we use our resources to help our people? Both countries will gain, perhaps in geometric proportion. And I told them that we must look forward to mega regional projects like gas pipeline from Turkmenistan to Pakistan and India. The same pipeline with the same throughput, 1.6 billion cubic feet per day for Pakistan and the same amount for India. The same pipeline will serve both. Maybe an additional $100, $200 million expense on a couple of pumping stations will do the trick. And the unit cost of gas will almost go down by 40%. So both countries will gain. Similarly, opening up of trade routes to Central Asia for India through Pakistan will help both Central Asia, Siberian part of Russia, as well as India. So many other, I told them about, recently I told somebody from the IMF and the World Bank, I said, you're talking of regional projects. I said, we in Pakistan and eastern Pakistan, southeastern Pakistan, Tharparkar, we have more than 100 billion tons of lignite coal of the type you have in the United States for producing thermal power. And I said, well, let not the Pakistan government or Pakistan investor come in. We'll give permission as a government to any foreign investors who will exploit the coal and convert it into electrical power and supply it to India next door. Because Western India has a shortage of more than 45,000 megawatts at this moment. And in another 4 or 5 years, there will be a shortage of 100,000 megawatts. The cheapest and the best way to supply that is from our coal, which is lying just next door. And we're not going to give any sovereign guarantees. Let international private capital come. Let the World Bank and Asian Bank and other multilateral agencies who are very keen to do this kind of work, let them come and have this kind of a regional cooperation. We'll allow this power to be sold to India. What we need is proper price for our coal, and that can be worked out. And we'll earn foreign exchange, and they'll get much needed energy for their industrial development. So between two big countries like India and Pakistan, we are 140 million. Of course, India is almost a billion. There can be tremendous benefits, but a great deal will depend on whether we move towards a peaceful resolution of Kashmir. If custodial killings go on, if mass rapes of women go on, if brutalities go on, if troop levels do not reduce, we will just not have the conditions or the environment for movement towards a brighter future. So I think what we really need between India and Pakistan is a change in outlook. And we heard a great deal about Mr. Gujral's efforts to promote peace and talk. But we responded in an even more dramatic manner. We said, yes, all right. And our Prime Minister took a big risk by promoting the initiation of talks between India and Pakistan bilaterally. And so far, we've had 2 secretaries level meetings. And the vibes we are getting from India now are that, as before, they are now backtracking from the concept of the working groups which they agreed with us that will be created. And this agreement was reached between the Indian Prime Minister and our Prime Minister at at this Maldives. There is, I wouldn't be too sure, but the vibes coming right now are not good. But they're again backtracking. I hope you can. Yes, but the point is that we would like to move in that direction. In fact, I've been even telling our friends in Central Asia, presidents there, and even the Russians, that this whole region of Central Asia and South Russia, Siberia, all this could benefit each one of these countries, including Afghanistan, Iran, Pakistan, India. We could all benefit, and I see this region, it has the potential of being as dynamic as in the next early part of next century as the Pacific Rim countries were in this last quarter of this century. So I think there's tremendous scope, and we would like to really move in that direction. I think war between India and Pakistan, confrontation is too risky, and it will cause large-scale destruction and will drag us both down. So I think leadership at all levels, whether political or otherwise, needs to put that away as an option which should never be looked at. And therefore we must move towards a peaceful resolution. But continuing bloodshed and brutality and inhuman treatment of our people, many of them are ethnically very close to us, of course they give a bad name to India, but they are extremely sensitive. We are very, very sensitive on that. So we'd like to work towards peace, and I wish it could be simple, I wish it could be easy, but these matters are not so simple. But I think they are doable. It is possible to move forward. And one should not have any false hopes of early or an immediate solution. But let us at least take those first few steps. So Pakistan, I'd like to assure you, is willing to move along that path, and that is, we've made that very clear. But Kashmir has to be resolved, otherwise things will remain bad between us.
I just realized we're going way over our time. Do you have any other questions?
Just a brief follow-up. Since Mr. President, this issue not pertaining to India and Pakistan only, this is an issue of international community because it's different to the world body. Why the world body has become so insensitive that they are not prepared to take up this issue because of how this is their responsibility also?
The world body, well, I don't know about the world body, which world body you're talking about, but I think world powers or regional powers or powers that count, which is the power that counts. The power that counts today in this monopolar world or unipolar world is the United States. And we are not on the television screens of the United States. And that's how the United States acts. That's how your Congress acts. That's how your decision makers act. If there's something on the screens in the United States, they will act. It took a long time for Bosnia, the Bosnian problem, to seep down into the American decision-making consciousness. When it did, they took some action, albeit late, after humanity was brutalized, but at least the United States had the courage to take a lead. I wish they had taken it earlier, but they took it. But it was something that was appearing again and again on their screens. Kashmir is not appearing again and again. It's not part of European civilization. The Americans and the Europeans only